What's going on, everyone? We are kicking off the next phase in this shop build. We're starting with the floor. If you missed the two previous episodes where we did the planning and the gravel base or the floor itself, make sure to check those out. I'll link them out in the description below. But today we're gonna get going on this floor. It's gonna be framing and siding. I have one large door on the front and then two windows to make sure we get incorporated in here. And like the other videos in this series, I'm gonna try and talk through the thought process and as much as I can to make sure that it helps you in your own build. So it's time to get going and get some work done. Make sure you stack your lumber in order, because the first piece that I need, all the way down here. Great. Just laid out this first top and bottom plate for the first wall. I'm gonna do these at 16 inches on center. Now, for a shed that's not gonna be put through a lot of abuse, maybe it's not very tall, you're not gonna be putting a lot into it, 24 inch on center is perfectly fine. I decided to go 16 mainly because I want this one to be a little bit on the overbuilt side. I might have a loft in this as well. We get a lot of snowfall here, so ultimately I figured 16 inch on center is the better way to go. Okay, as for markings go, I just wanted to line up and make sure, double checking that this is hitting exactly on the edge, right where I want it to be. I'm marking these quite simply with just an arrow on both the top plate and the bottom plate in the center of the stud. Now, if I'm going to be doing a lot more complex framing, I'm going to go ahead and mark out the exact edges of each stud. So I'd mark it somewhere around here, and then each stud is 1.5 inches in width, so I'd mark another one right over here. So for shed wall, shop wall, or something like this where it only has a stud, no windows, nothing like that, I feel just fine putting the mark in the middle and going ahead and getting that set up. If you know, you know. First wall is completely assembled. I started pulling from this side, every 16 inches on center. There's an extra piece here where I had a break in the top and bottom plate. The other thing is right up here at the top. If you can see, I have a double plate. The double plate is pretty standard for home building. I don't know if I would say it's standard for shed building, but again, on this wall, it's pretty big. I definitely wanted to double top plate it. The thing that is also good about top plating is if you see right here, I left a space. That's because the top plate from the adjoining walls are going to cover that. So now having this wall constructed, I can go ahead and stand this up. It is pretty common though for smaller walls like a shed to go ahead and put the siding on first. The more material you put on this wall, the heavier it is. So for me, this is again almost a 16-foot wall, 16 on center. That's a lot of material. So I'm gonna go ahead and put on one sheet anyway, even though this is a heavy wall, because what that does is I can line it up with the edges of the siding, and that makes my wall square. I'm gonna leave a little bit of an overlap on the bottom here so it overlaps this lattice. That again, just thinking rainfall will fall down the siding and over the floor that was installed so it doesn't ever seep underneath it. So I left about 1.5 inches to overlap the floor. So I'll go ahead and make sure and leave that in there, and that should also, if my measurements are correct, leave it nice and flush at the top. First wall is up. Those are always the most challenging. I probably shouldn't have started with one of the longest walls because it's the heaviest, but this guy back here is holding it up so it doesn't fall down on me. The next thing I need to do is put up one of these adjacent walls so that it makes it nice and stable. So I'm gonna go ahead and start building this front wall. As far as the front wall goes, I have one large door. I actually have some French doors that I'm putting in there instead of a shed door or a typical garage roll-up door. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that thing framed, and then we'll flip around again and see exactly what we did to frame out a door. Okay, so my battery died as I was doing this front wall, but like I said, we'll show exactly how to frame this door and how that all came together from the inside. But one thing I wanted to point out, I put up a couple more sheets right here, but made a mistake. So I started with this piece over here to make things all square. And then when I put up this front wall, I threw this one on and measured the overhang I thought to be exactly the same. However, I was about a half an inch off. So I left an extra half inch of overhang here on the bottom than I did on this side, which meant that when these corners met, they were slightly off. So the lesson learned here is with siding, you always want to start with the bottom and go one side to the other, bottom to top. That not only works for panel siding, it obviously works for any other lapped siding and things like that, where you actually need to make sure that you are very carefully continuing that pattern. But it also applies to this panel siding. Follow the pattern, bottom to top, one side to the other. Front wall and the side wall is done. So next thing we need to do is put up the remaining two walls. Now I needed to move my brace to the inside, which means that I can't do this second wall all at one time, which it's probably better that way. This one was a pain to put up. In fact, I dropped it the first time. Not really dropped it, but it slid out from underneath me. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and frame up this side. I'm not gonna put any of the siding on first because I'm gonna go ahead and brace these as I'm going along, and so that will make things all nice and square. So this back wall here does have a window. I'm gonna go ahead and frame that one in, and similar to the door, we'll talk about that once it's all up and we can see it from the back side and see exactly how the door and window is framed. We have finished the walls in the shop. Everything is in. As I mentioned before, let's talk a little bit about framing these windows and doors, and then we'll take a look around at a few more details and call it a wrap for this one. Taking a look at the window framing here, let's compare it to just a standard wall. Standard wall has studs every 16 inches. A window needs to be able to support the weight of the missing space here. So what happens is, if you think about it, the weight comes down, goes across the header, and then continues down the sides here. So each window and each door is gonna have its own stud, its own trimmer pieces right here, and then the continued spacing on top and bottom. Likewise, on a door, you have a stud, you have the trimmer, you have the header resting on the other trimmer, and then this stud on the outside of it as well. So each window, each door has its own stud, has a trimmer, has a header to support the load coming from the top. Basically, again, just emphasizing the fact that this is a big open space and any weight needs to be supported, which is supported by the header and comes down both sides. That is it. The walls are up. The shop is ready for the roof. Like I said, these end pieces here really are kind of an extension of the wall, but really they're part of the roof framing. So I'm gonna have that on a separate video. So again, keep an eye out for that one. Make sure to check out the previous episodes that we've done for this shop build, and we'll catch you on the next one.